Hello and welcome to episode 149 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701, and with me are three people that I can't seem to come up with any blatant lies about tonight. So please welcome Greendragoon, Markhawkman, and DuncanIdaho.
Hey!
I'm a giant man made out of candy.
I've just run out of lies about you guys. I guess I'm going to have to come up with truths about you people. So,
or you can delegate.
It's not in fact painted to look like a Christmas tree. It was actually painted to look like a Tellarite ship.
As far as truths about you people go, you know, I'm sure there are pretty interesting ones. I mean, for me, I was nearly killed by a forklift a few weeks ago, so you know that's pretty good.
And so far, you haven't turned into a were forklift as I predicted.
Not yet, but it is you know, the most Mystery Science Theater-ish injury to ever have that is possible. They tried to kill me with a forklift. They is me this time. So
well, a few months ago, I rewired a lighting fixture, and then after I finished rewiring the lighting fixture, I realized the power was still on.
Ooh.
Somehow I managed to not get zapped. Actually, I didn't even have any of the wiring spark while I was doing it. That was the really strange part.
Oh, now I feel bad that I didn't almost die.
I was like, oh, I feel cheated somehow.
But anyway,
I mean, it's not one of those things where it would have killed me.
But it could have resulted in some injuries. So anyway, we are still, of course, in the middle of some downtime. Thankfully, we have ZeroniousRex here in the chat room to give us a little bit of an update. They are working on it, hoping to have it up soon. They're making sure that the lighting changes don't require that all of us have to do things to our maps, which is great. Fantastic.
Yes.
Very considerate.
Because I did count the number of maps I'd have to redo, and I think it was probably 15 just with one change, and that was with the Omni lights. But even still, I'm probably going to have to go back.
Which I just asked about.
Yeah. But it's still going to be the fact.
There are some issues that they're trying to address before they roll the Foundry back out.
But it's still going to be the point of like, oh, now I can, you know, now the aesthetic balance is all tweaked, and now I can go back and use certain objects as new light sources, and I'm probably going to have to redo all my missions anyway.
I was going to say, I mean, the perfectionists that we are, we will end up redoing them anyway.
Yeah, because I've gotten at least to version like 1.3 on all my missions. And even like 2 and 3.0. I think Gemini might be in 4.0 right now.
Well, I mean, if there was ever a good excuse to just go back through and redo anything on your mission that you ever wanted to do to it, right now, you know, as soon as the Foundry comes back up. Because, I mean, it's a great time to go through map by map and see if does everything look right? Does everything look how I want it to look? Could it look better in any way? And can I change things?
Yeah,
and,
especially with older missions too, that maybe you're more able to sort of put things together now. So in the name of just like, hey, I can make this look better, you can, you know, start rolling out
also
more
do other things.
Yeah. Find more typos.
How high do I have before they cast an ominous shadow?
Yeah, more things will cast shadows now, that's for sure.
Yeah. Although I kind of dread, like, if people are still using graphics 1.0, all of a sudden all Foundry missions start looking a little bit wonky because we're all enjoying the new engine. So that'll be funny to see it, like, just in Foundry reviews, if there are any issues with people still doing 1.0 and starting to see missions built differently.
And, you know, as far as testing goes, you can always, you know, do it from both perspectives as you run through your mission. Turn the lighting off and turn it back on, see what things look like.
Yeah, especially if you're doing something that requires a very absolute lighting level, like a very dark mission. I'd say definitely test it both ways.
Well, either way, I expect we have a lot of work once we...
a lot of trouble in one to make it as dark as I could, and that one, well, I was never 100% satisfied with the end result.
Yeah, I'm kind of like enjoying the break right now from Foundry downtime because I know, in addition to updating everything for the lighting engine, I am also going to have to make 3 more missions before I can get to something new. Just with what I've set up for myself. It's like, yep, I did kind of like 2 cliffhangers, so I don't really have any choice there. Ooh, that'll be fun.
Yeah. Well,
but hey, I get to explain Apex.
I can think of a few interesting things that I would like to do, because if we actually have a way to make missions that are actually, like dark, I would love to tinker with Darkness Between the Stars, because I actually had a reason to make one of those maps, like you're crawling through an unlighted cave.
Sorry, we know Mark is cutting out a little bit tonight, and so I think your internet is on the fritz, isn't it? A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not doing so well today.
Oh.
It happens, and we're all, as we always like to say, that we're sort of not professional grade podcasters here very much. So, we do this as a hobby, and so we don't always have exactly the best equipment or anything like that. So I live in fear that the random disconnects that I get from my stupid modem won't happen during the show. So far I've been okay with that, but it happened like 3 times last night.
So,
yeah,
we basically
times today too. I just like all of a sudden totally dead.
It interferes with the 700 crystalline entity runs that I have to do.
I had a lot to do with 6.
I'm almost done with Snowflake season.
Yep.
Almost.
As am I. I've done almost 600 runs now.
Oh
and
God!
I have a few to go still. So I'm doing it on all 52 characters.
You poor man.
You have a lot of dedication that I will never have.
This is so I won't be poor.
16 characters.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to earn 2.6 million dilithium from this.
Look at you can get one.
No, I'm not.
I didn't want to call it C-Store. Yeah, but yeah,
dilithium store.
I'm not going to dignify those dilithium costume prices by buying.
Come on, there's the vest. The vest.
Of course,
awesome.
I want them. That's the
vest
point.
is awesome.
Those are must-haves, and they're locked behind a horrendous price.
I'm just going to say that the one I got, the Wrath of Khan vest, I kind of think that's worth it, because I really have found a lot of use for that jumper. And it's going to come especially in handy during the winter event. But, I mean, it's the lowest price one. You can kind of justify because it's just like a ship. It's the same price as a tier 6 ship, but with ground customization options. I find that I sort of get more use out of those. I know, but everyone wanted the dilithium sink, and this is what we get. A dilithium sink. We can blame the internet.
The worst way possible.
It's not a dilithium sink. It's more like a dilithium black hole.
Well, I lived through it. I still got my tier 6 sovereign class, even though I did get the vest recently.
But I have so many other things that I need to use that dilithium for anyway, so it's probably not bad.
Because, you got, all the Kelvin ships, and I've got a vest and a 1 tier 6 sovereign class.
Yes.
And I may have got that accidentally by upgrading a Kelvin torpedo to gold.
Well, a lot of the times when I do this, I actually end up hoarding keys for the next lockbox. So. It's nice to be able to get everything you need out of a lockbox without actually paying any money.
Yeah, that's good. That's how I've gone through it.
So anyway, that's kind of what's going on in game at the moment is the Crystalline Entity event, of course, with winter event coming up soon.
Yeah.
I just it would be really nice even if we could only even if we only had the Crystalline Entity as a static prop that didn't do anything and just stood there and stared at you. It'd still be nice to have it as something we could place on a map.
That would be kind of fun.
How many ways can we ruin first contact with the Crystalline Entity? What scientists have we brought along this time? You ate my chihuahua. Time to die.
But I have to
Anyway,
wonder.
Music's so loud, it's giving me a pain in the shards.
Oh
So
God.
I have to wonder though. What is going to be the ship this year?
I'm gonna say,
Are we out? Are we out of green ships now?
I'm really hoping for that Vorgon battlecruiser, because that is probably my favorite ship in the game that has not been released yet.
Yeah, that's a cool looking one.
My money is on that being on the next summer event. I think
No!
Well,
Tier 6
the whole
Breen
reason
Shelgret is my bet.
The whole reason they put the Vorgon as with the summer event is because they have that connection to Ryza because they were in that episode with Captain Card on Ryza.
Yeah, but can't Q start a beef with them?
Well, Q can do anything.
Plus, their ships look tropical.
Is a Deus Ex Machina.
Well, one thing to ponder here, though, is that it's not whether Q can do something, but whether Q wants to do something.
Yeah, there's that.
It would be funny. That's all the reason he needs. Just
Q
the entire event, the entire winter event is just Vorgon jokes.
Q can fix your plot, but Q is also lazy.
Well, also, Q does things primarily for his own entertainment, not necessarily because he thinks that you would like it.
Yeah.
I know. It always seemed
a Q episode.
It always seemed like he was kind of secretly working to nudge humanity along.
Yeah, that was my earnest reading of it. It's basically every time he shows up, it's basically have humans demonstrate something they already kind of knew about themselves to reinforce it, to kind of push them in a particular direction.
Yeah.
But he's also funny.
Which comes back to Q can fix your plot, but he's also lazy.
Yeah. I just want
to
marry
to watch you struggle.
Yeah. The only thing is that if I do a Q episode, I will have to find an equivalent to a mariachi band that I can do in the Foundry.
There's our next costume challenge. We did the create the ugliest looking costume you can think of. Don't we still
have those vests from those fur vests from the aliens on the TOS planet and the TOS tutorial? Taurians.
Yeah, I think we do. Yeah.
Okay, we obviously don't have a sombrero analog, but
if we had some of those, what was it? Okay, so when Agency yesterday came out, they had a bunch of costumes that were in the pack that you could get, and one of them, I think it was the Andorian, has this kind of like poncho thing on it.
Yeah, it's got that oversized vest.
Yeah.
Like the rivets on it, I think.
But I don't think we have that in the Foundry yet.
We're clever. We'll work on something.
We're clever. We can figure it out.
That Andorian outfit actually is one of those things where you look at it and you wonder if the people who use the costume in the episode says sort of like an instant the guy alien. It didn't really stop and think about whether it actually had a logical reason for it.
Oh, so I just had a thought. In theory, the Q we are dealing with is actually the son of the Q from TNG, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So maybe he is different from his father, and he's more into like metal bands.
Because we do have that one animation.
Yeah, we could just have
guitar playing animation we have is pretty metal. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's actually a good animation. Unfortunately, I can't go look up the name of it. That actually looks a little bit like drumming.
I have used that one before as an Easter egg. So.
I have. I put it in because I had a band in the bar in my KDF Spotlight mission, so I had to use that one. And then I can't remember what I used for the singer.
I'm sure there's some shouting animation.
There's something like that, maybe. Anywho, so since we are in the middle of downtime, but we didn't want to go like a whole other week without doing a show, just to completely not get out of the habit, I think we're going to dispense with kind of our usual segments and just go right into random discussion topics. And Dragoon kind of came up with a good one. So let's talk about planets.
So yes, so a while ago, I think like in the last episode, we were talking about something about relating to the star charts, and which kind of got me to get it off the shelf and started flipping through it, and I rediscovered that it's got an entire section on the classifications of planets in Star Trek. Now, obviously, if you go only by canon sources, that list is somewhat limited to like only a handful, which are, I saved it off, Class D, Class H, Class J, Class K, Class L, Class M, and Class Y. With D being planetoids, M being the obviously habitable planet, and H, J, K, and L being kind of various, H, K, and L being various sort of, but not quite habitable planets, and then J being a gas giant. Oh, and a Class Y for that one episode of Voyager. Which in a weird way is kind of like the most famous type of class of planet outside of M. But, I'm sorry, you're going to say something?
I was just going to say is that each of these things is something that corresponds to a type of planet that you often see in science fiction. I mean, like, the stereotypical desert planet, Arctic wasteland planet, molten lava planet, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So when I first started this, I was going to...
Earth-like.
Yeah.
Naturally.
When I first started this, I was just going to kind of go through each of them as listed out in the star charts. I mean, I figure since Stowe uses the Star Trek star charts for its maps of the galaxy, it's a worthy enough source of information. But then I discovered this website. Show it here. And this is Star Trek The Final Frontier.net, or if you want the URL, it's sttff.net, and I will include a link in the show notes. But they've got this really cool website with a like very nicely produced that goes through all the classifications. And for the most part, this generally follows the same guidelines as star charts, and I have no doubt that they kind of used star charts heavily as a source for a lot of this information. That said, it differs in a couple of places, and the more I kind of dug into that, the more it kind of brought up an interesting discussion. So I thought it was worth us kind of going through and looking at what are the different kinds of planets and what kind of cool places can you set your mission other than a Class M? Because I mean, let's face it, Class M is done to death.
And the reason Class M is done to death is because, when you're shooting a television show and you need to go on location, well, you only have Earth to go to. So that's why every alien world looks like Vancouver. Or the Vancouver area. That's a Stargate joke.
I think we're losing
you're,
Mark.
Yeah, you're really getting out there.
It's very... Yeah, I know. I can hear it when you say things.
Yeah, it's
We'll try and muddle through.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I do like the Geomortius name for a planet. Because that's also a great villain name who can control earthquakes. I am Geomortius.
Geomortius, death by rock.
So what is that? So that's a Class B planet that they have labeled as Geomortius.
Class A's through Class C are the basically a cooling stage of rocky planets with small rocky planets with minimal atmosphere. So think Mercury. So you kind of start out in Class A with geothermal, and Gothos is actually listed as an example of this from the Squire of Gothos, TOS. Then it cools down into a geomortis, which is, and then finally it cools into a Class C geoinactive. And it lists Mercury as an example of a Class B and Psi 2000 as an example of Class C. Also Pluto.
So they're almost like protoplanets.
They are
Yeah,
small,
so,
small rocky with a minimal atmosphere. So barren rocky worlds.
like minor planets, yeah.
Yeah.
You might say.
Um,
That's a more recent term that's coming around.
So after that, we get into Class D, which are the planetoids. And if you spend any time in the Foundry, we got a bunch listed as such. So these are the moons, the Plutos, anything that's a smaller size rocky planet, not quite big enough to classify, or quite.
If I remember right, part of the it's small enough that it has too low of gravity for a normal atmosphere.
I like Class E.
I don't want to say star charts came out before Pluto got its demotion, because it still lists Pluto as a Class C and not a Class D.
Well,
obviously this one has been updated.
Well, one thing to remember here is that it's the Star Trek universe, and the definition of, or the a separation between a minor planet and a proper planet is largely arbitrary.
Maybe in a more advanced society, they've moved beyond having to relegate planets to minor status.
Either that, or because they've encountered so many minor planets, it's now basically a taboo to call one the other, because you don't know which direction it can go. It can change both ways.
And
well,
what if both were inhabited and you called one minor? They'd be insulted.
I'm just imagining right now. Yeah, I'm just right now imagining a cult of Pluto.
Well, I mean, I think we're fine in that. I don't think Star Trek ever specifically specified what class Pluto was. So,
yeah,
because they never went there.
They flew past it in a couple of places, but
I actually don't think that Pluto would be classified as a Class P planet, simply because of the fact that it's far too cold to be Class P. Class P planets are
not Class P, Class D.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, though, you see where I was going with that. It's definitely not Class P.
Yeah. Cold, minimal atmosphere.
Okay, so
Pluto's only known atmosphere is actually made out of hydrogen gas.
We're learning a lot more about Pluto lately than we ever have before, which is fantastic.
Yeah, we now know that it has 5 moons.
And it's red. Most
of which are tiny specks of rock. Maybe ice. We don't really know for sure.
So,
all right,
next one.
Next one is Class E, which is geoplastic. This is basically a planet with a molten high surface temperature, which is roughly the equivalent to the size of Earth. It gives the one example it gives is the planet Excalibur, which I'm not looking off the top of my head which one that.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one. But
Excalibur was
Can we
was the planet where Kirk teamed up with Abraham Lincoln to fight Genghis Khan.
Oh, it's the one with the
But do
Okay,
they use any?
the lava dude, or the
Yeah.
lava creature.
Okay.
The inhabitants of Excalibur were lava
I was just gonna also commit
monsters
heresy here and just say
because
that.
the Excalibur.
Yeah, I think we're losing Mark again.
Yeah.
I take it not one of your
was
favorite
just-
episodes.
I like the Space Lincoln one because I thought it was a joke when they first saw the silhouette that, hey, it looks like Lincoln, and then I was right. It's like, wait a minute. Like my insane rambling shouldn't actually come to pass in a Star Trek episode.
A Star Trek
Yeah,
episode
but
from the 60s.
Yeah. But I was just going to say that Classy, another possibly more familiar example to some people watching this now is that it might be Mustafar. I'm just going to commit that heresy right now. Excalibur, great example.
Actually, that kind of works. Yeah.
Mustafar, I mean, that's, we all saw Darth Vader got crisped.
We're not afraid to bring in stuff from other series, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm the last one to complain about that.
Another real world example of something that might go into this category is Io. Technically, it's a moon, but as moons go, it's a rather large one.
But is the surface molten though? And that's the thing.
I think we have
geo-
discovered a few geologically active moons out there, haven't we?
Yeah,
Io
it's just
is the only object known in the solar system to have volcanoes that actually spray stuff so violently that they reach escape velocity.
Right, yeah.
I was just going to say that for geoplastic, an example would have actually been Earth very early in its history.
Well, it kind of gets interesting because like Class A, B, and C is kind of a progression of planet types. Class E, F, and G are also a progression. So if we move on to Class F, geometallic is things have cooled considerably. There's still a lot of volcanic activity. Not particularly pleasant atmospheres, carbon dioxide, ammonia, methane. But those eventually harden into a geocrystalline, which the volcanic activity goes even further, and so let's see. F, it gives it Janus 4 as an example of a Class F, and then Delta Vega as an example of a Class G.
I'm trying to remember Janus.
Yeah, I'm totally losing Star Trek cred tonight because I'm not. I'm blanking on all these
I've got Memory
names.
Alpha open, so I'm gonna.
Okay.
Well, I know what Delta Vega is. Delta Vega is from the where no man has gone before.
There. Okay,
Yeah.
so Delta Vega. Let's see, Drago.
Where no man has gone before. It's where they try to maroon Mitchell.
It had a very it had a very
yeah,
kind of like a
no man has
desert
go before.
feel, but it didn't have like the windswept desert look. It was more like the
Okay, Janus is the planet with the Horta.
Okay.
that one. That was definitely the sort of a place where there wasn't an actual breathable atmosphere. All of that episode took place in mines that had been dug underground and given an artificial atmosphere, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the notes here, and a geoplastic is a planet's age is between 0 and 2 billion years. Class F is between 1 and 3 billion years, and then Class G is between 3 and 4 billion years.
Yeah, so these are all pre-Cambrian explosion Earth.
Yeah. So yeah,
Basically.
then Class G can then solidify into any number of other planets depending on atmospheric conditions. Which brings us to Class H, which is the desert planet.
H for Kwisatz Haderach.
Dude, desert planet.
I mean, a classic example of a desert planet would be Cardassia.
Also, the planet we didn't go
because
tonight.
it is supposed to be hotter.
But yeah, the other planet we're thinking about going tonight, Nimbus 3.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so Nimbus, Ocampa is an example.
Oh yeah.
Actually, in Ocampa's case, I wouldn't classify it as H, because of the fact that its surface actually has pretty much no biosphere left, because of that runaway.
It
drought.
was Class M and became something else by artificial means, essentially.
Yeah.
So that one's difficult to classify because all this is going to be basically based on the basically the ecosphere. So what's going on with the ecology, and Earth at various stages can be classified into this. So a Class H desert planet. Actually, we haven't really had that, but closest would be Triassic or in Permian when we had Pangea.
A Class H planet, one real world example you might be able to classify Mars as that.
But
It's
it doesn't
cold Earth.
Well, actually, for Mars, I would
Then
go
what, you
up
know.
the scale a bit because what you don't have is any kind of ecosphere. And what we're dealing with are basically variants of planets that are able to support life. Because if you want to go to what Mars is, I think you would go up the scale a little bit. Already blanking. But the
It is a Class
geometallic.
D.
Okay, so just to clarify, Mars is listed in here, and it is not Class H. It's actually Class K, but we haven't gotten to that one yet. So there are other classifications in here to. The classes E through G seem to be specifically for young planets that have not fully formed yet or haven't settled.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically it seems like a Class H is basically anything that has less than 20% surface water.
Yeah, Earth definitely has never been that.
I was gonna say, I mean, I think for the most part, Earth has had lots of water.
Yeah, because like we've had lots of desert in the history of the planet. Not total, but it's definitely the surface water component that's going to set it in here.
All right, so
Nimbus 3 is listed. Ocampa is listed as the Class H.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Corneria. Wait a minute. I'm going somewhere completely different with Corneria there.
I don't remember which one is. I
I'm
think
going to the Lilat system with that one. I'm checking the encyclopedia now. See if it was in. Let's see.
I don't find that one on Memory Alpha.
Cornelian star system, home where Wrecker ordered the Enterprise D to escape the hole in space created by Negalium. So where Silence has lease.
Oh, it was one of those things where you barely had any time to see it on screen at all because of the fact that it's like a minor background object in the episode.
But I'm reading this. It's Cornelian is the closest thing on the list, and that says Corneria.
It's possible.
Corridon. There's Corridon. There's Cornith.
It's possible that's from a novel or something else.
It could be a non-canon source.
Or Star Fox references worked its way into this.
I don't remember Corneria being a desert world. At least not
let's
Star
basically
Fox.
say after I got through with it, after defeating Andros, came back and you know what, I'm gonna lay waste to this place.
I'm sick of you and your problems. I
had to do everything.
The star charts also lists Rigel 9, or not Rigel, Rigel 12, and Tau Cygni 5, which are neither of which are, other than the Rigel system. I'm not familiar with Rigel 12.
Probably SETI Alpha 5 too. After
there's actually multiple planets in the Rigel system that are inhabited. And I think they all had different classifications.
Yeah, Because the one they visited in the pilot of Enterprise, we saw that it had very snowy area, but that's kind of hard to try to say, well, the whole planet's a snowball, because it could just be there in an Arctic area.
But this is science fiction, and planets only have one biome.
Not after I'm get done writing for them. Because I made sure Nimbus got another region.
All right, so moving on, we get to Class I, and this is where the first big discrepancy between this website and the star charts, because the star charts Class I is a gas supergiant, whereas the website here lists Class I as an ice giant. And I got to be honest, I kind of like the website's classifications better because
Yeah. I do like the ice giant because
Star Charts doesn't actually have a classification for an ice giant, which seems like it should be a thing. And all the ultra giants and whatnot are all listed way up in the up IS. So I think it makes more sense to put ice giant down here than it does to put a gas supergiant.
Yeah, especially since it generally goes by a stepwise progression.
Yeah.
Honestly, I kind of think that there is no logical reasoning behind the ordering of things in there, especially when you look at Star Trek Enterprise and how each of the planet classifications is apparently named after a Vulcan word. And since they're named after Vulcan words, the ordering of the words in the Vulcan language probably has nothing to do with the way they're organized in English.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Unless it's one of those mysterious galactic coincidences.
Yeah, but we've gone to the giants, and we're dealing with planets that were basically along the Earth spectrum.
Yeah.
So we're jumping we got to jump over to Class M to get the rest of that picture.
Okay, so I personally like Class I being ice giants, so at least in my missions I might stick with that, because then that includes Uranus and Neptune.
Mm-hmm. Which are actually, as we should remind ourselves, we have those maps with these specific planets from our own solar system in the Foundry.
Yeah, I've used Saturn once.
I believe I've used Neptune.
And do we have the from that? I forget the name of the mission. It's the KDF mission where you fight the Herodian around that crashed spaceship.
Alpha.
Alpha, yeah.
Yeah, I know we have the ground map, and we've got the
the ground map and the ground backdrop, yes. But
yeah,
I do not believe we have the space one for that.
Because that space map is so cool.
The sky map is great. I used that in my last mission.
Yeah. I wonder what sort of light that'll put off.
Oh God, that'll be interesting because I did that in an enclosed station with custom lighting.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Yeah, Otha.
Otha.
All right, so getting on to Class J, we finally get to the classic gas giants, and we are. I was going to say, speaking of Jupiter and Saturn, so basically this is, I think, is your mid-sized or smaller gas giant.
Mm-hmm.
We do know that there are bigger gas giants than Jupiter out there in the universe.
Yes, and we get to a whole bunch of classifications for those a little later on.
Nice.
Yeah, the largest one I can think of is actually believed to be 10 times as massive as Jupiter, and not a star.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can get quite large before you achieve fusion, so it's a big and wide galaxy out there.
It is.
Think of so much matter that isn't doing anything right now.
and there are actually stars that are smaller than Jupiter, so.
Well,
but more massive.
It's not diameter; it's mass that you really need to consider.
Definitely.
One of the most amusing things that someone calculated the volume and mass of Saturn, and came to the conclusion that its specific gravity is actually less than that of water.
So it can float technically.
You can find a
That's
bathtub
right,
big enough.
I remember seeing that.
Only Q can test that. He comes back. Yep, it's true. Oh God, that's a great line.
Write it down. You can put it in your next mission.
If you
Yes.
manage to find a puddle big enough, as soon as you dropped in Saturn, the puddle would congeal into a giant ball of water around Saturn.
All right, so what's next on the hit list here?
All right,
Class
next
K.
we get to Class K adaptable, and these are planets that are not inhabitable by default, but
Can be terraformed.
can be terraformed. And Mars is listed as an example of this. In fact, I think I had to look this up a little earlier, but this is actually one of the canon items or canon classifications listed, and I think it's from TOS, and it basically said it's adaptable for human colonization through the use of pressure domes.
That's an interesting way of phrasing it. Does this mean like dome cities? Like, well,
I think so.
because it just seems strange to put it that way, because it sounds like you're talking about building something kind of like a space station on the ground, and
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the
pretty
idea
much.
is that Mars's natural atmosphere is not thick enough for human habitation, even if it was the right mixture of gases. So pressure domes are
true.
necessary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty much
extremely
like
thin.
you only need pressure domes because it's probably got the right geochemistry and probably right atmosphere to not require more serious types of protection, like against more substantial UV rays. Even though you're probably going to get a lot, but you don't need to go extreme with something that's also vacuum sealed.
The way someone explained it to me once is that if you go to the top of Jupiter, most people would get anoxia simply because of the fact that the air is so thin up there. Mars has thinner air than that.
So one of my favorite movies recently is The Martian, and I went and read the book too, and the book is pretty good too. And the author admits that like the one conceit he made to drama versus things that can really happen, real science, was the initial storm on Mars. Is because the atmospheric pressure is so low, the storms never get that bad.
Yeah. I think I actually made that comment when I was watching it the first time.
Oh, and apparently you need to bury potatoes deeper to have them grow like that.
Well, one thing that like you said, is that it's a consequence of the low air pressure, is that when the wind does pick up sand on Mars, it really doesn't fling out as hard as you would expect.
No.
Yeah, just
What you get is more like it just gets gradually hazier and hazier.
Also, there's a reason why the sand on Mars is so fine. Because that's actually part of the thing with Mars, is that it's not sand like we know it that's being blown around in the wind on Mars. It's actually this stuff that's like almost like flour rather than what we would think of. So it's more like dust.
It's very fine.
So I'm just reading.
Of course, because Mars doesn't get rain on Earth, material that fine gets, it becomes alluvial silt rather than getting blown around most of the time.
Yeah. So what were you going to say, Duncan?
Oh, I was skipping ahead to the next one.
Okay.
Because I was reading this one, I do really like, and I want to make a custom mission around this.
There you go.
Okay, so we get to Class L, which is marginal. Although this is where, again, the star charts and the website here disagree slightly. They're both labeled as marginal, but the website makes a claim that this is for super Earths and gives a diameter of 15 to 30,000 kilometers. Whereas the star chart says no, the Size of a Class L is the same as you would find in a Class M, and the only difference is that the I think it's just left as a classification for planets that are almost Class M. So
yeah, they're
you could
almost Earth-like, but they have a higher carbon dioxide amount versus the oxygen, and the biosphere is like a jungle but worse.
Well, the one thing I do like about the website classification on the Class L is the size of the planet. Because this is the super Earth category, and I am really interested in that one because you can go in different directions with the ecology.
Yeah, although like I said, I mean, there was some debate whether a Class L actually means a super Earth.
It will when I make that mission.
Okay, I should say that
in space, Class L seemed to be more about the environment of the planet rather than the size or.
Well,
yeah,
there's going to be basically big changes with the Class L environment just based on the fact that they have higher gravity. So you can imagine weather patterns might be a little different, but the whole thing about the massive size is that the ecology is going to be a lot different in terms of how things are being able to disperse, how basically what the scale of the life is going to be able to operate at.
There was no mention of any differences in terms of gravity in the Deep Space Nine episode.
I'm just talking about the super Earth.
Yeah, just in general, you would think that with a higher size would come a bit higher gravity.
Unless you're compensating with lower density.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things that people have proposed in real life is that planets that are mostly made of ice would actually have a lower density than rock planets. So you have this giant planet with twice the surface area of Earth, but the same
gravity.
With the same gravity, yeah. Surface gravity, yeah.
So as far as Foundry authors would say, I would say Class L is it could be a super Earth, it may not be. I think it's more just a classification for planets that aren't quite to Class M status, but are still planets that your away team could at least survive for a while on.
Yeah, so they got limited to vegetables. So miscellaneous alien of the week planets where you have rocks and you have a little bit of stubble, and that's basically it.
So in the Deep Space Nine episode, Cassidy Yates used this substance called trioxin to prevent herself from dying of anoxia, which presumably you could just give your entire away team a hypo with trioxin, and that would be enough for 6 hours or so.
Would this also apply to the planet that Quark and Odo got stuck on? Because that was pretty marginal as well.
That could be.
Yeah, possibly.
Not sure. Maybe.
Because, there was basically just plant life there.
Okay, so I need you to guys, or you people with the encyclopedias, to look up Indri 8.
Okay.
Indri 8 was one of the planets that you remember in the episode The Chase, where they were collecting all of the different DNA fragments to get the preserver message.
Okay. Because, both...
specific one was that? Because there was the one planet that was almost nothing but rocks with a few barely living like it.
Well, I remember this off the top of my head because I actually watched that episode a few days ago, and I'm now forgetting exactly which planet it was in that jigsaw puzzle.
I think it might have been the one that was destroyed, or they destroyed the ecosystem.
There was one of them where it was a jungle planet, but before that,
the Klingon captain destroyed the biosphere of it.
Yeah. It was one of the few times where you see a Klingon do something that was like, I don't know, like complete...
genocidal?
Yeah.
They killed the Tribbles, too!
Granted, it was an uninhabited planet, so, it... Still, though.
I still think we need a great Tribble hunt mission instead.
That's pretty insane.
They Save the dribbles.
Now, Klingons don't care about ecology, do they?
No. The thing is, the reason they killed the tribbles off is because they're ecological pests.
Oh, also true. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're like
and
voles.
and somehow they got Kronos back in shape. So they've learned ecological restoration techniques.
True.
It could just be one of those weird things where they're just like, if you actually, talk to a Klingon about horticulture, they're gonna have a very strong opinion about it. It's just no one asks them.
To be honest, I suspect the reality of it is that most Klingons don't care as long as they don't need to take care of it personally.
Well, what we've seen little glimpses of in Klingon culture is there's sort of these unseen classes of society, like scientists and lawyers and all that kind of stuff that, most people don't see on a daily basis. They see the warrior class, and there are the Klingon scientists. They're around. They don't get the glory.
They're not on the D7s that approach Kirk and say, "Hey, I'm going to fire a torpedo."
Exactly.
There's also the fact that Klingons are known to use slave labor, mundane, boring things as farming.
True.
Because the Rinsin is that their planet had been conquered by the Klingons, and their loss in life was slave labor in the Klingon farms.
Yeah, but there has to be a Klingon overseer telling them what to do. So that Klingon overseer has to know a little bit about the hydroponics and ecology.
One of the interesting things with the Arinsin is that it demonstrated that the Klingons' approach to that was rather hands-off for conquerors, because in that case they would show up every month or so, and didn't even have a permanent presence in the system. They'd bring in a small fleet of warships with enough cargo capacity to haul off the produce, and okay, tax time. Blah blah.
Yeah, I think we're really losing Mark now.
It gets better and it gets worse.
Damn you, internet! Theme of the night. All right, that's the title.
So how much of that? So how much of that thing I said about the Arinsin did you?
We get it because I remember this from, it was an episode of Enterprise, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Klingons, they just visit every so often and say, give us your tribute or we're going to kill you.
Yeah. So Class N.
Anyway, yes. Moving on.
So Class M, I mean, if you don't know what this is,
class.
You need to go outside more often.
You live on one of these. Most of you. I mean, I'm sure, maybe this signal is bouncing off into space and there's, ET is listening in, but he probably lives on an M-class planet too.
What if you live in your own little world like I do?
I live in the internet. I don't actually live in the physical world.
I live in a Class I planet. It's imaginary.
Well, it's interesting because I've met Dragoon in person now, but I've never met either of you, so I'm not entirely sure that you're real.
Yeah. I mean, it's still the theory that we're just simulated with some type of computer program that Dragoon has cooked up.
Dragoon is not nearly that good of a programmer.
Well, so you say.
That's
Anyway.
exactly what someone who was that good a programmer would say.
So Class M, yeah. It's
the traditional, habitable world.
This is where things with two legs live on and then have thrilling adventures with.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Good amounts of water, breathable atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. And it should be said that, I mean, that encompasses a lot of different types of planets, from Earth, which is pretty lush, lots of plants, lots of water, to Vulcan, which has, not a lot of those things.
Yeah. But I think the key one is abundant surface water. Because even though Vulcan is mostly desert, it
does have some oceans.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's one of the things with Vulcan that's kind of an interesting conundrum is that it seems that Vulcan's environment is partially artificial because one of the things that they mentioned about the sundering is that the sundering happened in the aftermath of a thermonuclear war.
Yes. Of course, the backstory of the Vulcans is that they were even worse than us once upon a time.
I always kind of like that aspect of Enterprise, was the idea that the Vulcans were always nervous around us because we reminded them of themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, we get to Class N reducing, which the prime example of it given is Venus.
Sulfur dioxide atmosphere, where if you attempt to breathe the atmosphere without a spacesuit, you need a new pair of lungs.
So yeah, the thing I'm walking away from this one with is high atmospheric pressure, very hot due to said atmosphere. Like various places you don't want to hang out.
Yeah, it's one of
the example they give is Venus.
If you are on this planet, you will get off this planet or die.
Yeah. One thing I'm noticing about a lot of these classifications is that these are all basically gated to 10 billion years. What happens at 10 billion once you're all over the odometer? I'm just waiting for the next series. It's like 10 to 15 billion, complete psychotic, crazy alien ecology, or just rock.
I don't know. What's the
when it gets to 15 billion, the planet becomes sentient.
To be honest, that's actually one thing where that website diverges from the way it was presented in the TV show, because the TV show didn't bother with attaching ages to classifications. It just described their physical attributes.
But it wasn't really something that was probably needed for the episodes. It's usually about what is this planet like now? Is what was usually the deal.
I do like the age classes because that does help structure some of these into some kind of a series. We're able to say, okay, something that's this young can eventually become another type of planet because there is an evolutionary history with a lot of these guys.
Well, I would also kind of look at that from a slightly different point of view because, in one solar system, a molten hunk of rock might not cool at the same rate as it would in this solar system.
Well, it depends on the local conditions, but I mean, that's not necessarily going to put it beyond like 5 billion. Because
maybe not. Hard to say without looking.
I know. How much time do we have till our sun goes nova?
Yeah.
Okay, so
anyway,
moving on, we get to a fun one, Class O, which is paleagic. I assume I'm pronouncing
Pelagic.
Logic. Don't argue with the scientists, man.
I've just heard this word before.
Okay, pelagic actually refers to the part of the ocean that has waves in it.
Well, in this case, it refers to a planet that is mostly ocean, and it gives 80% or more water.
Mm-hmm.
So, looking at some of the planets that it gives examples of, the Star Trek. I assume the one that was blown up? Oh, wait. Oh, it's the one where they built the Xindi weapon.
Oh, yeah.
That was underwater?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see what a planet that was controlled by the Xindi Aquatics.
Okay. Well, that explains why that's in there. Star Charts also gives the planet Argo. And I'm spacing on the top of my head which one that was.
That was from the animated series.
Is that the one where they turn into fish people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I mean, I think I've seen a couple of Foundry missions that at least have settings in oceans.
Yeah, one of the Gethralkin's AEI mission, for example.
Pax is saying Ryza may be class O. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how much.
Well, I don't
Ryza.
think we've seen enough Ryza to be 100% sure, but we do know that Ryza does have a lot of water on it.
Yeah, I don't know if it passes
Although
the 80% mark, but
that the areas of Ryza that we've seen were basically their equivalent of the Bahamas.
okay. So next up is Class P, which is glaciated, and this is the determining factor seems to be. We don't know that for sure. According to Wei Yun, it's actually quite pleasant.
Yeah, but he's a Vorta, and we don't know what a Vorta thinks of pleasant as.
And he may have just been repeating a rumor.
Or he may have just been trying to mess with people.
I was going to say,
Yeah,
I mean,
he does that,
the scene he had just gotten back from Brain. It was a conversation with Damar. The determining factor seems to be where water ice covers 80% or more of the surface area.
Andoria.
You would think so, though it doesn't list Andoria here.
Yeah, it does.
Andoria is listed on the website.
It's the first.
Oh, okay, so it is on the website. Sorry, I'm actually
your star charts again.
I'm comparing the two, so I'm going back and forth between the star charts and the website.
Gotcha. But yeah, the website does list Andoria and Rurapenthe.
Yeah, which makes total sense.
Yeah, Rurapenthe is actually so cold that while it does have a breathable atmosphere, as a general rule, you're not going to want to be there.
Nope.
I mean, if you recall from the movie, Rurapenthe is actually so cold that if you don't wear protective clothing, your skin will freeze solid.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
All right, so
Class Q.
Variable.
That's interesting. I'm just going by this on the website. And the example it gives is the Genesis planet. So something that will blow up within a few days.
Well, I don't know if that's specifically what it means.
Something that is changing before your eyes.
Yeah.
So what I'm pulling out of the website here and the star charts, which mostly agree, is that it's a planet where the temperatures vary wildly. So you can get differences from molten all the way down to like carbon dioxide ice. And this is basically...
There was a planet like that in the animated series.
But it's very extreme conditions, essentially.
Yeah, it was allegedly a natural phenomenon on this planet, but it was such a fast, energetic process that it's hard to imagine what natural forces would cause a planet to be like that. Although in this case, that planet had apparently been that way for millennia.
Apparently,
in the case of the Genesis planet, it's not natural.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like class Qs are quite rare. And the high variation is either due to like unstable density in the planet or a very eccentric orbit where or a star that has a very dynamic range or unstable range.
In the case of the planet in the animated series, it was actually a situation where things would go from being like icy and frozen to volcanic in a matter of hours. It would just kind of like alternate like that, and like I said, bizarre.
Yeah, I'd say that's
Yeah.
definitely class Q.
Yeah, but I get the impression, at least when I'm listening here, is that you're not going to run into a lot of class Qs. Like most planets you run to are generally pretty stable.
Another factor that could create a class Q is Q trying to mess with you.
Huh.
Maybe that's why
That
they
may
named
be
it
why
class
they.
Q.
It could very well be.
Class Q. It's just like we can't explain this, so we're just going to blame Q.
All right, so class R, we get to rogue planets. These are planets that no longer orbit a star. They got thrown out or escaped their orbit around a star and are just flying freeform through the galaxy. In general, this is okay. So, I mean, just kind of going on real world.
We've seen a couple of them in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Archer went to one and messed with a race of snake people.
Yeah.
Shapeshifters.
Yeah, and then
They
also
weren't
list the,
shapeshifters. They actually had some sort of illusionist ability, I think. Yeah, well.
They also list the Founder's homeworld,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which also
yeah.
which is in the nebula.
Or it wasn't before the Tal
It
Shiar.
was, yeah.
So I can tell you, just from like real world science, that rogue planets are generally going to be
Like Pluto.
quite
only
cold
Earth.
unless they've got some serious geothermal going on.
Yeah.
And even then,
It'd be very unlikely that it would have any life on it.
Yeah, especially a lot of greenery like that.
Founders seem to be a bit of an exception because of the fact it was in a nebula. It wasn't just like in deep space or anything, but even so.
Well, it's
Yeah.
still rogue because it's not in orbit of a star.
The one that Archer encountered was explained as being warm because of geothermal activity.
which is kind of Star Trek's go-to explanation for planets that should be very cold but aren't.
There's just lots of heat coming from the ground. Well,
But I mean, definitely a key point about this is that where in our ecosystem, energy comes from the sun and then is basically translated into the ecosystem by photosynthesis. In case of rogue planets, only things like chemosynthesis can occur.
Yeah.
It would have to have like a very thick atmosphere, I think, to keep the heat in.
Yeah.
Sure.
we're
'Cause otherwise
basically
it dissipates.
building a planet now.
Yeah,
Okay.
but in the Enterprise episode, it was as having a kind of like almost like a smoky atmosphere. It was thickly cloud covered and dark constantly. Everything.
So yeah, I mean, I think in the vast majority of cases, rogue planets are not going to be inhabitable.
So in my exploration mission that I have not finished, and you know me, who knows if I ever will. Let's be honest. It actually deals with a rogue planet, and I had the idea to make it, just completely ice encased. Because there's no star around.
In one of my missions, Darkness Between the Stars, that planet you encounter that's made out of dark matter.
Yeah, I guess I also have this covered with Trident. Although I have 3, and they're in their own pocket domain of subspace. So I don't know if that counts as interstellar, but 3 planets without a star.
Yeah, it's not orbiting a star.
If I was going to do a rogue planet, I think I would do something like has a frozen ocean, but underneath there's still liquid water.
Under the sea.
And so maybe you have a race that survived. It's a planet being free flung.
Of Jupiter's moons might be like that, but we're not sure.
Well, they got a couple of moons in
Europa.
the solar system that they've are thinking
Europa
there's
and I think Titan, maybe.
water.
There's
ocean.
also another. There's another
Not
one
the
in Saturn as well.
Methane atmosphere. Titan has a methane atmosphere. It's too cold for liquid water.
that's definitely one of the cool
know,
things about water is that once it forms ice, it's actually a pretty good insulator.
One of the peculiar things about Titan is that Titan's environment is actually near what's called the triple point for methane, where only a slight variation in temperature and pressure is required to cause it to transition from gas to liquid to solid.
Actually, right here on Earth, there is essentially a lake of liquid water under a glacier.
Yep,
It's
it's
called Lake Vostok in Antarctica. Oh, apparently there's 400 known subglacial lakes.
Yep.
I didn't know that part. I was just Googling. So,
All right.
Well, one of the things with subglacial lakes is that a lot of glaciers don't actually do that thing where they go down to the ocean. Most of them actually melt and feed into rivers. And it's the part on the bottom of it that's liquid. It's not the surface of the glacier that actually melts. It's the bottom where it touches the ground.
it almost has to because the ice would float.
Yeah, kind of.
So we've got 2 gas giants.
Okay, so next up is this is where the star charts and the website just differ, because this is where Star Charts keeps its ultra giants, and it preserves S through T for ultra giants. In this case, the website put the super giants up here too. So class S is the gas supergiant, and then class U is the gas ultragiant. Which are just generally even larger gas giants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just get more gas in there.
All right, so
stuff in it.
Next up is class X, which is not in the star charts.
Ooh.
So this one, the website, I'm not sure where they're pulling their information from.
Maybe they just made it up.
Well, we already know that they made up at least some of it. So yeah.
I want to see class X.
So according to the website here,
Chthonian, which I think is a Lovecraft reference, probably.
No, Chthon is actually a Greek word.
Greek word. Okay.
It's actually a word for hell.
Well, in this case, the website refers to when a class U planet spirals into a hot zone of a star system. Its proximity with the parent star typically results in gravitational forces stripping the atmosphere from the planet. The end result is a class X planet, which is little more than an exposed core of a U world. All right, so if we go back up to U, U is a gas ultragiant, which I assume is mass enough to have a solid core.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is when
we theorize that the gas giants have that sort of thing, like Jupiter.
Actually, it's theorized that the solid core of Jupiter is only solid because it's under intense pressure.
Yeah, and it's mostly frozen gases.
Sample of the material and depressurize it, it would actually evaporate. Some people believe that the core of Jupiter is actually a mass of hydrogen in its metallic form.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Solid hydrogen is apparently believed to turn into a metal when it's pressurized adequately.
It's interesting. Like, one thing I'm looking at right now is I'm just right now looking for where they actually include Osiris, because right now I actually have that listed for an actual extrasolar planetoid. But right now I'm trying to just see where they get. Actually, no, that's SOIRIS. I don't know where they're getting S. I'm not getting. I don't know where they're actually getting this example. SOIRUS, because it's not on either memory alpha or beta.
Oh.
Could be someone's RP.
Possibly.
Who knows?
Because I'm not. Yeah, I opened up online and I'm not even finding anything on that one. That Planet Osiris Pegasus classification might just be a typo. Because extrasolar planet.
Because one question is, who's actually made this website?
Yeah, it's fan.
Yeah.
Stuff.
There's
It's a fan website. Yeah,
I'm
it's
just.
So the parent site is Star Trek: The Final Frontier, which is a fan fiction series. Which is not to say that these are not a good classification system that they've expanded upon here.
Well, that brings up the question is, it specifically mentions a Class U, which is an ultra giant. So we're talking a gas giant that is in orders of magnitude more large than anything we have in our solar system, but still not quite big enough to become a star.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is it theoretically possible to have the core of a gas giant compressed so much that it doesn't want to return to gaseous state?
That's entirely dependent on what it's made out of. If the core of the planet is, silicates, it'll turn into mercury basically. But if it's what I was talking about earlier with hydrogen compressed until it turns into a metal. No, as soon as you decompress it, especially if you heat it after you decompress it, it's going to evaporate.
Guess it really depends on what's inside a gas giant.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we've never actually looked on the inside of a gas giant, so it's hard to say for sure.
Okay, so
it'll be really difficult to do so.
Authors, you might have to take a grain of salt with this one. I mean, it could be an interesting plot point. I mean, what happens when the gaseous satellators of a gas giant are stripped away? But there's no canon for this one, and nothing in science to suggest whether or not anything like this is even possible that we know of. We're not astronomers.
But yeah, and obviously we have plenty of license to delve into the fiction side of science fiction. So.
True.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, we definitely do get...
Just make it up.
There is a thing there are scientific concepts behind the leftover cores of stars.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes.
Maybe.
In the case of neutron stars, though, those are held together by their own gravity.
Well, it's possible. I think it's the question is how dense would this core be?
Not
how strong. How strong would its gravitational pull be?
Well, definitely not neutron star strong. Obviously, this is
for sure.
a gas giant that was not big enough to be a star. I don't know. I mean, is it possible for a gas giant to achieve some fusion without fully sustained fusion?
That's kind of the idea of a brown dwarf, where you're getting a little bit of fusion, but it's not to the same extent as a full-on star.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's emitting some amount of radiation from some fusion, but it's not producing a huge amount of visible light.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's an interesting concept to play around with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I did a little bit more digging into that Class X Osiris, and the best I can say, it's a typo and sort of speculating on a known extrasolar planet.
Okay.
It may have come up in the fandom, but it has not come up in Star Trek.
So
either in memory alpha or beta.
What's the known extrasolar planet in question? What do we know about it?
It's basically discovered it had a little bit of water vapor, and I believe it's one of those smaller planets really close to a star.
Okay.
One of the things that's interesting about Star Trek is that all of the scientific
Better than both.
advancements that we've made since most of the shows were produced, particularly with the discovery of extrasolar planets, the super Earths and the gas giants that are much, much larger than anything we have in this solar system. People didn't know about those back when, say, like TNG was being made.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff is pretty recent.
Yeah.
One thing with Osiris, it is, I believe, more massive than Jupiter. So I think it's a gas giant orbiting close to a star. So yeah, it's within. This is really close. So semi-major axis, it's 0.045 AU.
Oh, really?
So that's
is
huge.
Well,
I mean, that's distant from a star?
The distance between the Earth and the Sun.
Well, it's semi-major axis. This is just talking about the orbit.
Okay, that's
okay. So that kind of makes
orbit.
sense with what's being said here, is because the description here just basically describes a gas giant, like its orbit falling into its star, and as it gets closer, the gases are basically stripped away, leaving just the core. And before it finally.
Yeah, I think that's what they've detected here is they found it has an atmosphere containing carbon, oxygen, and evaporating hydrogen really close. So I believe this is sort of going one step further in what that might result in.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, it's obviously a leap of science fiction, but it's an interesting one.
Yeah, certainly something a Foundry author could do.
All right, well, let's round this up with the last one on the list, the Class Y, which is everybody's favorite demon planet.
That's where all the monsters are.
So,
or at least the silver blood that replicates you.
I've been kind of trying to figure out what the difference between a Class Y planet and a Class N planet like Venus. I guess it's temperature?
Yeah, probably. And also maybe present the oxygen too, the atmosphere too.
Atmosphere makeup, yeah.
Yeah, toxic radiation versus just sulfides.
Okay.
Also, I think that a Class Y planet may or may not actually have a solid crust.
Well, they landed one on Voyager.
It's everything wrong with the planet mixed into one.
Yeah.
If it sucks, it's got it.
There is
if it's hostile life in any way, shape, or form, prepare to find it here.
Barren, extremely hot, turbulent, with toxic
hostile
radiation.
to life as we know it.
Yeah, there's a note here in the star charts that says, note, classes X, Y, and Z are reserved for planets with environments particularly hostile to humanoid life.
So when we were talking before the show started, we were wondering if there was actually any sort of real-world classifications of exoplanets now that we're discovering many of them. And there is, as I was telling you guys earlier, but it is based on mass rather than ecology, because, of course, we can't really see what the ecologies of these planets are. So here's the one that I found. So it starts off with minor planets, moons, and comets. And this is based on, they call it an Earth unit. So 1 is a planet that has the same mass as Earth. And so a 2 is a planet that has twice the mass of Earth, etc. So the minor planets, moons, and comets are from anywhere from 0 to 0.1, times the mass of Earth. And then there's terrestrial planets, which are rocky planets like Earth. And then you have subterran, which is 0.1 to 0.5, the mass of Earth. Terran, which is 0.5, so half the mass of Earth to twice the mass of Earth. And that's where Earth falls in, obviously. And then you have superterran, which is twice the mass of Earth to 10 times the mass of Earth. And then we're into the gas giants. And then you have Neptunian and Jovian, which is Neptunian is 10 to 50 times the mass of Earth, and Jovian is 50 to 5,000 times. and there's obviously lots of stuff that goes into this, more sciencey stuff.
Science.
Sciencey is a word, right?
We don't have to categorize them very thoroughly, simply because of the fact that we have such little information about them.
Mm-hmm. I think, what is it? We can tell a little bit. I mean, we can tell how big they are, and we can tell a little bit about their chemical makeup. But that's about
There's
it.
actually one gas giant planet there where they have managed to get spectral readings of its atmosphere and have concluded that it actually has a significant oxygen in its atmosphere.
I may have been listing that planet. That was Osiris. That I was just looking up. It was also the first planet confirmed through 2 methods.
Oh.
But it was oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen for the spectral reading. And this was the one that was really close to the...
It's interesting because it's kind of like what you would want if you were to make a city like Bespin in the atmosphere of a planet.
Well, you also probably wanted a little further out from the sun, too, not 0.05 AU.
It depends on
that's a little close.
It depends on how hot the sun is, though, because if it's a relatively dim star, you need to be very close to the planet, because a red dwarf, you would actually need to be something like 0.1 AU from the star in order to have a reasonable temperature.
The star itself, let's see, apparent magnitude, spectral type G.
Okay, a G-type star is similar to our sun, which means that at 0.5 AU, it would probably be too hot to live on.
Yeah. So.
And in fact, there is a, planet like TRES-3b is classified as a hot Jupiter for being large and close to its star.
Oh, yeah, that's another...
I think this is more of an informal...
Yeah.
I think this is more of an informal... yeah.
But I think you just introduced a new sort of like...
planets.
A new catchphrase in Star Trek. Hot Jupiter. Like, hot damn. Hot Jupiter. Because, I mean, there's kind of not a whole lot of just, like, colloquialisms besides, like, beaming that's native to Star Trek. I mean, they don't have a lot of phrases. So, I mean, they didn't have Niven working for them as a writer, except in that one episode. The animated series.
So, you're walking along, one of your officers says, "Hot Jupiter, Captain. That's a good-looking Orion woman over there."
That basically. Cheesier the better.
And then you send that officer to an HR seminar, and
yeah, it's the holodeck counseling / tolerance training program.
Actually, one thing that's important to remember is that if catchphrases aren't cheesy, they're not memorable.
Exactly.
Also, yeah. So, circling this back to the Foundry, we have a lot of planets available, a lot of different types, and they're all listed as certain classes in the Foundry object database. But we don't necessarily have to use them for those listed classes. You take a look at something that okay, maybe that looks like a little bit like a class L. I can use it as class L.
Yeah, I mean, even the class Ys can be super varied. It's like funny. We've got like 8 or 10 different class Ys in the Foundry, and there was like 1 in the shows.
and I actually used one of those class Ys.
Artist was having fun.
Yeah. I actually used one of those class Ys as a class M that had its surface burned away by orbital bombardment. So,
yeah. So I mean,
in the Foundry, we are definitely masters of taking things and using them as other things.
I used them in one of my missions, the Beta Rana incident, where the star had recently gone nova and scorched everything in the solar system.
Yeah,
there you go.
I'm going to have to dig into those for Epoch Part 2, because I have written in that story that every single planet in the galaxy, and in several of the galaxies at least too, has become uninhabitable. So I'm going to be kind of limited in what I can use.
There's a lot of ones that look. There's a lot of ones that look uninhabitable.
Yeah, well, it's just in terms of the ecology.
There's some ice planets. There's some
rocky planets. But I have used one of the Class Y / Class X, like just very obviously uninhabitable in the start of Trident, just for a visually interesting system. And I also think at the start of my last mission, Entanglement, too, just because they are pretty.
Mm-hmm.
So, Duncan, I am just waiting for the mission where you go even further into the future and basically have it set during heat death of the universe.
No,
the year 200 million.
Where
the universe has contracted so much.
I'm done at 6.1. Someone else can go after that. Well, 6.1 million years, but
Who knows? Maybe I'll explore heat death of the universe.
it's just Q laughing.
I actually read a long time ago a story about that, because this story was actually treating the universe as a sort of a closed loop, and that every time the heat death of the universe occurred, the surviving races in the universe came up with some sort of insane plan to survive the end of the universe, and some of them actually managed to pull it off.
Dr.
And
Who
that
just
in
shows up
this
and reboots
particular
everything.
incident, kind of funny that you would mention that, because that TV show had a very different take on this scenario. But anyway, in this one, unlike Doctor Who, it did not radically change the nature of, reset everything. Big crunch, big bang, and if you somehow survive that, you got to take your pick of the newly formed planets or whatever.
Sorry, I was typing random things.
That's just military time. The only thing I was just would have to add here is just my own little theory that the universe is fractal shaped. So once you get to the heat death, the question of basically what happens to basically what happens with entropy when entropy is no longer physically possible as something to measure. And I personally have the idea that the universe basically inverts itself, and every single iota of the universe undergoes a big bang.
Sounds messy.
So yeah, it sounds messy, but that's kind of where you sort of get infinite dimensions and just the infinity of the universe as something that's completely undefined. So it just kind of keeps going. So you get heat. It's not necessarily you go heat death, big crunch, but it's heat death, then big bangs in every single thing that can possibly occur at every single iota. So every single string, for example, undergoes a big bang. Each one of those becomes a universe, and you just keep going. And you can keep going back too. It's just the concept of scale is undefined. It's arbitrary. It's just how far you go with the system. It's not a scientific idea because there's no way you can test it. But if I was to actually go that far, that would be my sort of quasi Star Trek sounding sort of postulate on what happens at that point.
What you'd essentially have to do is, if you have the player character in the middle of this, you'd have to create some sort of technology that shields you from it.
Yeah.
So you can observe it going on around you.
Or just if you wanted to talk about this happening in retrospect too, just with something that's so that's basically gone through this process a whole bunch of times. Because I might actually have to do that.
Basically, as Foundry also, this is how we torture each other: is to keep giving ourselves new ideas during downtime.
Exactly.
Let's see. During that, okay, how can I represent multiple big bangs happening simultaneously in the Foundry?
It's our own version of the tormented Tantalus. We can keep having ideas but never express them.
What if I keep using bloom effects?
So, as far as planets go, one of the things that we are a bit limited on, though, is gas giants. We have, 2 or 3 gas giant objects, and then we do have some maps that have ones built in. Like, actually, the one we're all in right now. Dragoon, if you adjust your camera angle. Because we're sitting in Andorra here, because it has some nice-looking planets.
Yeah.
And this is a map that we have access to in the Foundry as a pre-made map.
Also, another cool thing about Andoria is that we have both a, probably a Class P planet, which is, Andoria itself, and then we have the giant gas planet Andor. And then there's that other thing, which is like a smaller moon of Andor.
Yeah, which you can see off in the distance there.
Yeah, it's not habitable as far as I know. I guess it doesn't.
It looks a little barren.
Yeah.
So I just had this funny thought about.
We've got spaceships.
Earth, and when we had to figure out how the Earth moves around the sun, how complicated it must have been for Andorians to figure that out. I tried to figure out. I was like, no, not only are we moving around the sun, we're also moving around that gas giant, which is itself is moving around the sun.
There's other thing that's moving around that gas giant.
Yeah. Or it might have been easier for them because they do have that visual representation of this other thing that's moving around the other thing.
And then this other thing that's also moving around the other thing.
We're sounding like that Monty Python society, the putting things on top of other things society, except we're dealing with orbits. So I'm approaching the other moon of Andoria, and there's a little bit of an atmosphere. I'm doing a sensor analysis right now. A little bit of an atmosphere, but lots of craters and no other visible features. Heading back on the return journey now.
So it's like Luna, basically.
Yeah, except more brown.
So what you're saying is it's a Class D planetoid.
It's a Class D planetoid, correct?
Or a moon.
Essentially a great rock in space.
Do you think the classification system makes a distinction between moons and planets?
I just say it's all Class D.
One that they use in Star Trek actually does make that distinction.
Because I know
it's
at
just
least
whatever
the
writer feels like.
Yeah, because I know in the Foundry, all those Class D planets are basically moons. That's how I've been using them.
Yeah, that's how I tend to use them too.
Because I think moon is probably something just to refer to the fact that you have an orbiting satellite, because you can refer to any naturally occurring satellite as a moon. That's how Earth gets 5. Or more, depending. I think it's maybe even the 20s now. But then a Class D planetoid is specifically referring to a body that has become spherical due to a relatively high gravity.
Yeah, that's actually one of their criteria for determining whether something counts as a minor planet, is whether or not its gravity is powerful enough to shape it into a sphere.
So here's a question for you guys. Have you ever tried to use a planet object for something unconventional?
Oh, I can actually supply a screenshot. Let's see. Yeah, because
that's
this
a surprise.
I can supply a screenshot of exactly
You're the king of screenshots.
Yes, but the thing is that I can't describe this otherwise, so I'm just going to let the picture speak for itself. So It'll just take me a second to bring this up.
I'll tell you what I did is I used one as a star. Basically,
I've done that.
I put it on I took the gas giant, put a bunch of nebulas around it to be like escaping gases or something like that, and or solar flares, and then put it at the very edge of the map so that it would, with one of the supernova things, backdrops, and I positioned it so that where the player is, it looks like the supernova is coming out of the star. A little forced perspective there.
So I did something similar with one of the where I took a stock map that had a really bright bloom on it, and then I placed it so that the had 2 gas giants on the opposite side of the player from where the light source was, and so the light would come past the player, bounce off of the 2 gas giants, and cause like a lot of bloom, and make it look like they were stars.
Trippy.
Worked pretty well, as long as you didn't fly around too much.
There was one time I used a planet and actually put the player above it at like the North Pole and had him do a space battle up there, but that particular planet model didn't look very good from that angle.
A lot of them have strange features at the northern polar region.
Yeah.
So I put the
So what's your
screenshot in the
screenshot?
Yep.
Skype
Sorry,
blog.
I'm just trying to get it loaded up here.
That is cool.
Yeah, so I've used that in a couple missions, Eons and Inversion, SSF-22. But I got the idea from Charles Sheffield, who created a bunch of really kind of sort of just artifacts that an ancient species left behind that basically just sort of shock the imagination. So this is sort of my go at a similar thing, using a smaller example of 2 artificially joined planetoids.
That's pretty cool.
That is interesting.
So using the Ryza station, I basically just made it basically a cylindrical object, just copy and pasting those around, and then carefully adjusted the y coordinates so you have 2 planetoids connected. So that is one of the hallmarks of the 4.5 million years time frame, is that one species in particular, and I do explain which one in Epoch, but one species decided to do this as a prelude to something else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm thinking to myself that you could use this kind of technique to make like giant spaceships or something like that, world ships.
Actually, someone did that in one game or one Foundry mission I played a long time ago. I forget the exact name of it, but what it was is that the Federation had decided to send a colony ship to the Andromeda Galaxy. Don't ask me why he came up with that idea, but this colony ship was utterly enormous. I mean, he actually built something that really, truly looked like a ship. It's just that it was so big that it made Borg Unimatrixes look small.
I may have just sent 2 more screenshots. This is something in development. So
That would
this
explain the beeping noise, yes.
Oh, we're losing Zero.
See you, Zero. Thanks for joining us.
Patching is going backwards. Oh, that sounds bad.
Uh-oh. Things are going to be exploding.
I know they're working on a big update for the console version, which is supposed to go live tomorrow. Which I think is why the PC version had its maintenance on and minor patch on Tuesday instead of Thursday.
Yeah,
Makes
the console people were going nuts about that on the forum. They're like, wait a second.
Well, theirs was supposed to be Tuesday, and it got moved.
Yeah.
I guess. Probably delayed because it wasn't ready.
That might be also why there was kind of a little bit of confusion on the Tier 6 software release, is that those blogs may not have actually been ready for the Sun Tuesday release.
Yeah, that's a good
Actually,
point.
the blogs were posted last week, something like Thursday or Friday originally. Then they were taken down until to this week.
Yeah, I didn't catch when they went up originally. But yeah,
They
just
stay up long. Apparently, my best guess is that they were posted before the patch that they were meant to accompany was pushed live.
I guess we are getting a little patch for PC tomorrow. Let's see. Resolved an issue with uneasy allies to reward kit frames at epic quality. Old mail sent to the exchange by the exchange to the player's email inbox will be removed upon logging in.
Okay, so all those miscellaneous. Oh,
It says old mail. I don't know.
old mail. I might want to go ahead and just make sure
I
that.
know what it means, because one thing that people had been complaining about is that they had in-game mails that had black boxes for items, and they couldn't claim the items because they were black boxes.
Yeah, that's kind of to do with the fact that there's kind of an invalid item, something that used to exist but no longer exists. But this one is just old mail, and it could just be absolutely just like exchange sale notifications. But the one thing I double checked tonight, so there's no tiers. is any sort of sailed expired items, just to be absolutely sure you don't lose anything.
Okay,
Kananra posted a clarification saying, Spartan said it won't delete mails with items.
There we go. Okay, we're all
that's
good.
Then no worries.
It's probably
okay,
just cleaning
so
space.
we're about at our time limit, so I just want to go around the horn here and ask one little question before we end, as a good place to end. When the Foundry comes back, what do you want to do? So, Duncan, because I know you have a lot to say, you go first.
Okay, so when the Foundry comes back online, there's 3 episodes I know I have to make. One is a collaborative project with a couple of Foundry authors that we haven't really talked about in public yet, so I'm not going to give too much information for. The other one, so we're kind of going about it kind of like not necessarily trying to, just one-up purity, but it's, and photonomy, but in kind of a similar
No, we wanted more people to do these things, so go for it.
Yeah, the other thing, there's 2 things I got to wrap up. So the current season of Starfleet Security, which actually might be the last season, we'll have to see. But that needs a resolution since I did leave the last episode off on a bit of a, not necessarily a cliffhanger, but there's a pretty good plot hook for the next mission. Actually, several good plot hooks on that one. So the one more Starfleet Security mission, and then there's also another AEI mission coming, Epoch Part 2, and yeah, I've got Part 1 out, and I can't quibble about not having a Part 2. So Part 2 has to come.
Unless you're Dragoon.
Conclusions are for people who with more time.
Yeah.
Well, I never said if there was going to be a Part 3 or anything. I just know I've got to at least get to a Part 2.
So, speaking of Part 3, Dragoon, you think you'll get back to it when the Foundry comes back up?
Well, definitely. In fact, I was working through a number of lighting-related issues that I needed to figure out, and at the time I was like, this is all going to change here shortly. So now I got to actually answer some of this and figure out what I want to do with certain lighting and whatnot.
Excellent. Mark, what are you going to do when the Foundry comes back?
Well, I'm going to look at all of my missions to see how they look with the new lighting. And then, I don't know yet. I'll probably end up tinkering with stuff.
Well, I think I'm going to do that as well. Look at my maps, especially the custom builds, make sure that those look good, or if there's anything I do to make them look better. But one thing I really want to do, and it's something I wanted to do for a while, is to get my Descent series back up, which is the first missions I made for the Foundry. I've always wanted to turn them into Romulan Republic missions rather than Fed missions. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to challenge myself to actually get it done. And so what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to challenge myself to have a new screenshot to show on the roundtable every week from those efforts. So hopefully that will keep me going and keep me in there. So So that will be a relaunch of a 5-part mission series. It'll be for Romulan players instead of Feds this time. And I'm going to refine it. I'm going to make new maps for it and do all kinds of cool stuff.
Well, it sounds like we've got all sorts of things that we should be keeping each other accountable for.
Yes. If I can get this done, Dragoon, you can get Part 3 done.
Yes. We're just going to change the name to the Foundry Accountability Group.
There we go. That's what we'll be. All right, but for tonight at least, we will say goodnight and we'll say happy Foundry working on to.
Before we say goodnight, first off, I would say I'd love to push this question out to the community. If you guys want to respond and let us know what it is you guys plan to do once the Foundry comes back. And also, you can contact us. There we go. You can contact us by email at foundryroundtable@live.com. We are also on Twitter at foundryroundtab. Drogon can be reached at Drogon1701. Duncan can be reached at Gorgonox_SSF. And Mark can be reached at Markhawkman. And I, of course, can be reached at Greendragoon.
All right. Well, we will say goodnight.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.